What's with the obsession that narcissists have about themselves? Always focused on himself, always focused on him. Everything seems to have to revolve around the toxic person in your life. Have you noticed this? Maybe you've been in a relationship with a toxic person. You've noticed that your feelings, your needs don't matter. The things you bring up to the table, the things you try to discuss, the things you try to get involved in don't seem to even matter because you're insignificant or you're an inconvenience. How many of you have seen this in the relationship that you're currently in? The person that you're with that is so toxic, that is so focused just on himself. Now, sometimes it's hard for people to understand when we talk about narcissism, it's not just selfishness, but a huge part is being self-absorbed, self-obsessed. Now, when people see this, they often think, oh, well, these people are just in love with themselves so much. And it's far from that. In fact, it's quite the opposite. When we talk about narcissistic personality disorder, we're typically talking about someone who has this inward hate for themselves, has this inward looking of I don't like who I am, so I'm going to project and put a different image out there. I'm going to put a different mask out there for other people to be able to see so that I don't have to deal with what's actually inside. Oftentimes, this is where we see narcissists that mask for different people, for different supplies, for different situations, where they want to look a certain way. They want to act and behave and look acceptable in society, but in reality, that's not who they actually are. In reality, that's not how they're actually showing up. The majority of time, narcissists want to be able to hide who they are, to be able to hide guilt and shame. Now, sometimes people are like, well, where is that coming from? And sometimes it's coming from the same exact place that you develop your own guilt and shame. It's just a narcissist doesn't know how to be able to work through it and isn't willing a lot of times to be honest about the guilt and shame so that they can even work to find a good resolution for it. Sometimes this is someone who has been abused in childhood or has been emotionally or mentally abused throughout that early adult life and going into a place where, hey, that process of actually dealing with guilt and shame hasn't been fully developed or hasn't been taught in a way that actually makes sense. So everything is about defending that image. This is why narcissists get so upset when you start to attack their image, when you start to shine a light into the darkness of who they actually are, when you start to expose the shit that's inside, they get really upset because you're exposing something that is contrary to their image. Now, when we talk about narcissistic personality disorder, there is this obsession piece. And sometimes it falls under the piece of being envious of others or thinking that others are envious of themselves. So thinking hey, everybody's looking at me. Everybody's thinking I'm so amazing. Everybody's thinking that I'm so great. Steps into the piece in narcissistic personality disorder of being entitled. And so there's so many different pieces that revolve around self. Did you know where some of Narcissus originally came from? Narcissus was a Greek story of talking about this one guy who was one of the fairest in the land, looked the best, was the most amazing, all this kind of stuff. All the women wanted him, okay? But he was bored of that. And so he was going through the woods one day and he saw this pond. And when he got to this pond, he looked into this pool and he saw his reflection. When he saw his reflection, there was this obsession. There was this obsession of wanting to stare at it because he was like, this is so perfect. This is so amazing. And it's like this idea of I'm the best person ever. Let me continue to stare at this image. This is what narcissists are doing. Narcissists are staring at their image. They're projecting a mask. They're putting something out there and they're falling in love with that image of that, even though they know that the image is typically 100% false because it's not who they actually are. It's not the stuff that's actually underneath. But instead of being willing to work on that stuff, they end up falling away. They end up not doing the things they need to do to change, grow, and develop, but instead stay the same. Just like in the story of Narcissus, he stared at it for so long that he eventually died. Why? Because he didn't actually care about himself. All he cared about was that infatuation with the image. So you have to be able to ask yourself, what does this look like in your life today? Do you actually see this relationship where the person in your life is obsessed or so focused on him? Maybe you find this in conversations. You're having a conversation with him and all the conversation continues to do is come back to him, come back to his needs, come back to what he wants. Sometimes you see him be affectionate or loving and you realize it was just to get something for him. It was just to get you to have sex with him. It was just to get someone to appreciate him. It was just to get an image out there so that other people would praise him so he'd pump himself up with the image he's putting out there. So there's all these pieces that go together of a narcissist being obsessed with image. Obsessed with what everyone else sees, obsessed with what's out there, obsessed with, hey, I need to appear and look this way to catch the girl, to win the job, to do the thing that I want to do, but it's all about narcissists. So many people get confused when they think the narcissist is doing something good for the other person. I'm like, no, it's actually for themselves. And you just have to figure out what is the actual channel that they're thinking through. But it always goes back to self. Like, it always goes back to like what I want in the moment. How do I get that? That's the thought process. Narcissist oftentimes is doing this over and over and over again, even as a place of almost like self-defense and like a knee-jerk reaction of like, I'm just going to do this as quick as possible to be able to get what I want, regardless of who it hurts, regardless of how it affects you. I'm just going to do this. That's the whole thought process. It's all about me. Narcissists will do this to avoid shame and guilt, even though it hurts you. They will do this to run away from the problem, even though it hurts you. End of the day, Narcissist doesn't care. What he actually cares about is himself. Oftentimes that of himself is not, I love myself so much, but is more of the aspect of, I'm obsessed with my image, and I have to make sure that that image looks good enough so that people will validate me, that people will give me appreciation, people will give me attention, and I'll look and I'll act the way that people want me to look so I feel accepted, so I get what I want. That's the end goal. Narcissists are looking for what they actually want. If you're struggling with a narcissist in your life today, I want you to reach out. Go to rawmotivations.com/breakthrough to be able to schedule your free breakthrough call session today.